Hi, welcome to North of 48. This is part 3 in the middle of Ukraine with journalist Philip Eitner, who lives in Kiev. Um, Lynn has another question. What do you think about the conversation 10 days ago between President Zelensky of Ukraine and China's President Xi? Do you think that's going to be prove fruits for peace in the
No,
future?
no, I don't think so. I don't think the Chinese are acting in good faith when it comes to their peace plan. I know that's a widely held opinion within Ukraine that Beijing and Moscow are more aligned in their own interests than they have any interest in what Kiev wants. And I mean, if you look at the plan that was put forward by Xi, one of the biggest points of it is maintain territorial sovereignty. Well, according to Russia, there were free and fair referendums in 4 provinces within Ukraine. Now, does that mean that that is territorial integrity? Because if you talk to Moscow, then all 4 of those oblasts, those provinces, are now legitimately part of Russia. So is that part of territorial integrity? I
Right.
think Kiev would disagree. So um, Xi's talk with Zelensky was good. It was received here in Ukraine positively, in the sense that China is acknowledging Kiev's sovereignty and is consulting with Kiev and trying to work with Kiev. But the and there's a place for Chinese investment in a
Mhm.
free and legitimate sovereign Ukraine. Absolutely, 100%. The criticism that I hear all the time in Ukraine is that we don't think that the Chinese are actually, they don't care about what we want. They care about what they want in terms of like Taiwan and how this war is affecting their imperial aspirations. And because Beijing and Moscow are, you know, at least on the face of it, aligned. So everybody takes Xi's involvement here, Chinese involvement here, with a lot of skepticism.
Okay. No, I appreciate that. You saying that. The so
I mean,
harsh.
sadly, everybody wants peace. But I take this opportunity to say, everybody wants peace. Ukrainians more so than anybody. We got attacked last night. We were, air raid sirens ever since the Kremlin attack. We have had air raid sirens, and it's exhausting. It's absolutely exhausting. And the Ukrainian people, more than anybody else, want peace. They're
Mm,
not aggressors. They're not, this is not, they want this war to end. But if you don't end this war properly, knowing their own history and knowing how Russia has treated Ukraine for centuries, they know that if they do not achieve victory, real honest victory on the battlefield, that the Russians will just come back.
okay.
And so that as much as they desire peace and hate this war, my God, we hate this war. Everybody in this country hates this war.
I
But
hear
it
you, Phil.
can't end with a question mark. It
Yeah,
has to be definitive.
true. Harsh, who's from India, has what happens if Republicans come into office? Any changes in war dynamics?
Well, okay, so we're talking about 2024. Um,
Yeah.
I don't think one. I don't. I think that a lot can happen between now and the U.S. elections. And secondly, I don't know as the America is so behind supporting Ukraine that to alter the U.S. support for Ukraine would not, it can't just be turned on a dime. And I also think that most Republicans actually, despite the more vocal and kind of outrageous elements within the
Mhm.
Republican Party, although the Republican Party has been
Well,
kind of,
McCarthy was asked by a
yeah,
Russian
McCarthy just
reporter,
recently, right?
right?
Yeah,
So,
McCarthy
and he,
recently. Look, also say if the West withdraws its support from Ukraine for whatever reason, the Ukrainians will not stop fighting. So what that will mean is that the West will have to change its political stance, will have to change its support. And if they do, they will have to bear witness to, in essence, a genocide, because that's the only way Russia is going to control Ukraine,
Mhm.
is by a level of killing and suppression and brutality that we haven't seen since the Second World War. And will the West, having supported Ukraine, withdrawn support from Ukraine, then just sit by and watch the Russians have massive pogrom and, just killing on a scale that we haven't seen in a long, long time, because that's the only way they're going to suppress and control Ukraine. And I would argue that the West, would not, if we saw that every day on television, the Russians slaughtering Ukrainians, because that's what they're going to have to do. Will they remain as reluctant to support Ukraine if they now withdraw their support? So I don't see that in the cards. But there is an element in the U.S. Republican Party that's
Yeah.
not thinking not thinking in any terms except for their own domestic policies, and trying to just be in opposition to the Democrats. And since Biden has thrown his support behind Ukraine,
Mhm.
they're by default against that.
Well,
I
Jason,
would argue that the bulk of the Republican Party, is still kind.
right. Well, Jason makes a good comment in the chat. How can they defend themselves without weapons? Russia is using
Molotov cocktails,
total
Molotov
brutality.
cocktails,
Yeah, and they have factories.
bricks. Won't matter.
So,
You have to understand, and they have factories. I mean, I'm being a little bit glib there because they have their own military-industrial complex.
right.
But one of the reasons why you asked me on here, Walter, is to be a voice from Ukraine. And I will tell you right now, old women, old men, wives, children, everybody, will pick up a brick, throw themselves at Russian tank. They understand that if they lose this battle, they will be subjected to Moscow's cruelty for centuries to come, because they've been through centuries of Moscow's oppression. And so I have never, ever, I've been through many wars. I've been to many, many wars, and I have seen populations that are, determined to fight this, that, or the other thing, whether it's the Libyans against Gaddafi or the Iraqi insurgency against the Americans. I've never seen anything like what the Ukrainians feel right now. And they will, that's why I say we will have to bear witness to his genocide, because every Ukrainian will resist Russian occupation. And we will watch Russians killing children, literally. And that's not hyperbole.
Yeah.
We will watch Russians killing Ukrainian grandmothers, because every Ukrainian is going to do everything in their power to resist Russian occupation, because this is it. This is it for them. If they lose this battle, it's centuries more of oppression. And they know what it's like to live under the thumb of Moscow. So if we withdraw our support, yes, it will be all that more brutal. It will be horrific to watch, but it will happen, because Ukrainians will not submit. They're not going to lie down. It's now or never for the Ukrainians.
No, I believe what you just said.
It'll be horrible.
Yeah, it would be.
It'll be awful to watch. It'll be disgusting. It will be Russian soldiers mowing down grandmothers trying to throw Molotov cocktails. We will witness awful, horrible things.
Right.
But the Ukrainians themselves, they'll fight. They will fight with utter abandon.
No doubt.
Because it's everything to them.
Right.
You lose this battle, and you lose your country. You lose your identity. You lose your culture. You lose your future. You lose your children's future. Your children's children's future. Right. This is everything.
Well,
This is
Philip,
1776.
yeah, you're living in the culture, you're absorbing the environment, you're with the people. So I appreciate you expressing what would happen. We have a question from Harsh. Go ahead, Harsh.
Hey, yeah. Hey, Walter. Thanks for this conversation with Philip. Philip, thanks for enlightening us. I haven't been following that much, but just wanted to ask you something. So I have a few work colleagues who are in the like western part of Ukraine, and last time I had this conversation with them, they mentioned about air raids, sirens, and going to the bunkers. But they, I don't know if they acted that way, but they said they were safe on the western part. This was like maybe a couple of months ago. They're still working actually. Like I do interact with them daily, like during work hours and stuff. So what's the situation like in the western part?
The West is a little bit further removed from the fighting. They do get air raid sirens. The West, because it is farther away from the front lines, is often used as a place where the Ukrainians have done training and they've done stockpiling of weapons. So there are legitimate military targets for the Russians in the West. But also the Russians, I mean, also we've seen they're not really concerned always with legitimacy of military targets. They do like to show terror because they want to defeat. Well, they have to defeat the Ukraine. They have to defeat the Ukrainian people, and they know it. It doesn't justify their tactics, but they don't care if it's military or not. They're going to attack. So Lviv comes under attack upon occasion, especially during the winter when they were trying to deplete infrastructure and heating and that kind of stuff. But by and large, if you're in Lviv or if you're in Ivan-Frankivsk, you don't feel the direct effect of the war as much as out east. And heck, even here in the capital, we don't feel the effect nearly as much as they do out in Donbass or down in Zaporizhia or Kherson. We do because it's the capital gets subjected to air raid sirens and missile attacks, drone attacks, more than some places around the country, because this is the seat of government. Yeah, I mean it's a big country, and some sections are more affected than others. I mean, you drive around Kramatorsk or near the Bakhmut salient, for example, and you will see entire villages that have been, and cities and towns that have been leveled down to rubble. You don't see that in the West, and you don't see that around Odessa. You don't see that around Kiev. I mean, even up in Irpin or some of the Hostomel or Bakhmut. Not Bakhmut, but what's the town I'm gapping on? But anyhow, around you see some of it from the initial thrust around the capital, but for the most part, it's really out in the east where the front lines are, where you see the most. And then the entire country is affected by the knock-on effect of the fighting in the east, because you have internally displaced people and refugees and all of that coming. So it's not that Lviv or Kiev is unaffected by the war. Everybody's affected by the war, but the harshness of the war itself is mostly seen east and south.
Right.
Thanks,
So that's good for you, Harsh.
I hope your colleagues are remaining safe and mentally sound, because that's also an issue. Is how taxing this is on the mental health and the well-being of you because everything is subject to change. There's no stability. Everybody's affected by it themselves, if not by friends and loved ones. Nobody has escaped this war, even if they're escaping. Even if they're not as subject to, actual physical harm. Mental health is also deeply affected.
That's a fair point because it's a big team actually, and as far as I remember, I think most of them are still there. Some of them have left the country, a couple of them joined the military, but few of them are staying put. So let's see.
And
I
also,
hope they're
the
safe.
Ukraine army has like 400,000 women in it too. So
Yep,
women are doing
Yeah.
their part. So,
sure are.
Rodrigo, you have another question?
Yes. What would you say to the people who think we should be paying attention to the other, more, perhaps more urgent genocides going on, like Sudan or Ethiopia, where the West carefully refuses to even acknowledge that something's going on there?
Yeah, I've heard that argument. I've heard that argument. And I mean, we should absolutely be paying attention to every conflict around the globe and trying to negotiate peace and diminish. As somebody who spent the better part of 3 decades going to wars, war is a terrible thing, and it should be avoided as best we possibly can in every place, in every measure, in every way. Why do I think Ukraine deserves more attention is the fact that this the ramifications of what happens here is not solely internal within Ukraine, is solely not regional. This is global, and it will change because there's the argument that if you allow Russia to annex territory by force of arms, you are changing a world order that was established post Second World War that has been, you don't annex by force of arms. Well, Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan, any number of conflicts that can be brought up that call into question that. Yeah, well, but America didn't try to make Iraq the 51st state. I know it's kind of we can get into a really deep philosophical and geopolitical argument about but then it's just corporations that are now taking over and it's not nation states. Well, okay, fine, and true, legitimate. All of those arguments are at play here, but what for me, when you ask why pay so much attention to Ukraine, because this ends centuries of conflict on the European continent. The question of who controls the stretch of territory between empires from the Baltic Sea to the Adriatic to the Black. This is a triangle of power, which is where empires historically have maneuvered to try and control, most importantly because of Russia, but also no doubt because of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, the German imperial aspirations, and the Ottoman Turk aspirations. All of those things have combined into creating this very contentious stretch of land. And this is the last stretch. This is it. This is the last stretch of land between the Adriatic and the Black Sea. I mean, if you look at, okay, yes, you could argue that the First World War was conducted because of alliances that were then drawn into power. But ultimately, what sparked it was Serbian national identity in a post-Austro-Hungarian world, right? I mean, that's what happened in Sarajevo, sparked the Second World War, was because of this question of who has identity in a stretch of land in Europe which has been colonialized. You could argue, you can't not just argue, but we know that Hitler was looking for Lebensraum, which was Ukraine, a question of who owns the colonial stretch of territory in Europe called Ukraine. And when this war ends and it is definitive and it's decided these are the borders and this is who control and Ukraine has self-determination and sovereignty, that will stop that question, and it will stabilize Europe in a huge way. And it might change Europe, but it will stabilize Europe. And it's going to be it's going to be a big deal in terms of how nation states pursue their own self-determination, because this has always been a question. Ukraine has always been a question, and once this question is answered, as part of that, Baltic, Adriatic, Black Sea question, this will, the hope is, and I firmly believe, stop this question and destabilizing Europe. So,
Jason,
I
Philip,
hope that answers.
yeah, Philip, are you sure you're a journalist and not a history teacher? It's very good. So we got to kind of wrap this up.
Well,
'cause we
but
got something
Well, but
else.
Walter, we can't talk about Ukraine without talking about history, because
That's
this is
true.
living history.
Yeah,
This is the
100%.
culmination, centuries of history, and it's in answer to the previous question, why do I think Ukraine is so important to pay attention to? Is because as the culmination of history, this answers an open wound in a post-imperial Europe that will draw a close to imperial aspirations and bring about stability. And so that's why you cannot talk about what's happening here without understanding Ukraine's history and putting it within a historical context.
Right.
And we're witnessing history right now. We are witnessing
we're witnessing
history that has been a long time coming, and it's amazing. It's
well,
humbling to me. I'm honored to be here.
Well, you're doing Ukraine justice, my friend. I'll say that. So because we're kind of faced in the geopolitical world now, is how do you stop a country with a nuclear bomb from taking over another country? And that's what the world faces. And it could be Russia, it could be Ukraine, could be China. I mean, North Korea is supposed to have one now. So I agree with what you're saying. Do you know, so Jason has a question out of the chat. If you knew a Jimmy Hill, he was a teacher and he was an American killed in Ukraine.
Yes, I know of him. I didn't know him, but yes. Yeah, I know the name.
So
there's been quite a few Americans that have died here.
Right.
Sadly.
So
I lost a friend here. I lost a journalist friend here.
Oh my. And that shows you how this world has affected other people around the world too, as well, right? It's a global country. So I don't think there are any more questions. I have like lots, but we've spent 2 hours with you, Philip, and I so much appreciate it. I think it's been about 2 hours, sure.
Well, it's my pleasure. I do this because I really do want to fight back against Russian propaganda and the thing. Yeah, and the disinformation, the propaganda campaign, and the narrative that this is, the Ukraine is being used as a proxy state. Well, that might be true, but at the same time, that doesn't counteract the fact that Ukraine is seeking its sovereignty, so seeking its self-determination. It deserves it, and we should support it because there's a lot of reasons to support Ukraine, but that's why I'm here. And so thank you for listening to me. And I hope that those of you who had questions about whether or not Ukraine is a cause worth supporting, that maybe I've answered a couple of those questions, maybe put paid to some of the propaganda coming out of Russia. But ultimately, I just would leave you with the fact this country deserves to be free. It deserves to be its own country. It deserves to have self-determination. It deserves to live in a very different way than Moscow would have it live. And we really should support it because it's the right thing to do, and it's better for the planet. It's better for the region, and ultimately, I think it's even better for Russia. They have to do the hard work that was postponed in a post-Soviet Union. And as difficult as it is for them to look in the mirror and look at themselves in a non-imperial without the auspices of being the Russian Empire, it'll ultimately be better for them too. But first and foremost, my cause is with the Ukrainian people, and I urge you to support them because they deserve the right to have a democracy and to have sovereignty and self-determination.
Philip, well said. And I think you're a fan of long form journalism too, as well, judging by your answers. You must have had these questions quite a bit, and I appreciate the thoughtfulness in your answers and the way you could go on. And like solid, I could do this for 10 hours. So I just appreciate you waking up, I don't know if you even had a cup of coffee yet, Philip.
I did have my Lviv coffee.
Oh, there you go. Well, you got a lot of thank yous in the chat here, and appreciate it. I'm hoping
Spread the word. All I ask is you spread the word.
You got her, and I'm hoping that after a little time passes, if you wouldn't mind coming on again, and we'll talk about something specific.
Yep. Sure. We have to.
Heck of a guy, Philip. You take care, my friend.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. That was the final installment of the interview with Philip Eitner, who is currently in Kiev, and fascinating journalist. Go to his Facebook, Philip Eitner. Go to his YouTube channel, Philip Eitner, and give him some support, some likes, and you will also do yourself the service of being updated on Ukraine and what it's like with the alarms, with the bombs, with what's happening there. Thank you so much for listening. It's been North of 48. Bye.